Hello everyone. Well, hi everyone. I just wanted to give an update on the unfolding weather situation and also point to some of the important things tomorrow, including our plan for schools and transport and other really important essential services. I want to start by reflecting on some of the unfolding situations. I want to start in the northern part in Hervey Bay. There was 230 millimetres of rainfall in just a few hours in Hervey Bay. We've seen that culminate in reports of flash flooding in homes and in businesses. There's been a number of swiftwater rescues, and I just want to say a huge debt of gratitude to those emergency services personnel. They were there and pre-positioned, and the work that they did is the matter of saving lives, and that's why we're incredibly grateful to the people of that community. And I know it's a tight-knit community. We'll certainly be there to see things through for the Hervey Bay community, but we want to thank everyone as we continue to respond to that unfolding situation. In the past couple of hours, we've certainly seen some heavy rainfall, and as the system continues to come across the coast, there is no doubt that it continues to pack a punch. It's culminated again in that flash creek flooding that we've been speaking about over the last few days, but we've seen, in places like Carindale and Oxley, Stones Corner, there's been some significant rainfall in the last few hours, north of 100 millimetres. And look, our message remains as the last of this system runs through, and that is, please look at those maps and know your situation. Go to the disaster.qld.gov.au website. Please do that. Have a look at how those maps relate to your property. Have a plan in place, and just make sure that you continue to avail yourself of all the information. I want to reflect on some of the damage that we've seen again overnight, and more images of damages to property, trees down, a lot of impact on the electricity supply, and I'm reflecting on some of the scenes from the peninsula, the likes of Redcliffe. We've seen further complications on the Gold Coast. I really want to thank those communities for the way that they have handled this, but right across the board, I want to sincerely thank people for the way that they have continued to listen and absorb information, and the way that the emergency services personnel have continued to do their work. We're going to continue to see, and Sue from the Bureau will update us, but we're going to continue to see that rainfall in the short term, and it is important that we continue to do the things that have seen so far that response keep people safe, which is always the most important thing as we do. Some other updates. There were over 1,000 call-outs today from the SES, and again about a third of those for buildings, a third for trees. We've had 100 extra police over and above our normal allocation helping serve the community. 850 fire and rescue troops on the ground responding to calls, everything from water in homes, fallen trees. We thank them very, very much. And the Energex crews who we have seen out in force, and that certainly lifts people's spirits. I want to reflect on how big a task this is for the electricity network. Since the start of this event, we are looking at somewhere in the order of 450,000 homes and businesses that have had power loss. 450,000. As of right now, it's still over 300,000. So despite the fact that over 100,000 connections have been restored, we're still dealing with 750,000 people in approximate numbers who are impacted. I got the chance today to go to the depot at Greenslopes and say thank you to those crews before they headed out. It's been a really challenging day of rain and wind, and they are working to reconnect that power. And I just think there's a state that's deeply grateful for that. 1,200 of those Energex workers were here, ready to go. 800 have come from Ergon, from the other end of the state. and I look forward to seeing some of them and thanking them for their efforts in the days ahead. Okay, I want to get on to schools because we've had 1,049 schools closed, and no doubt this weather event will continue to test the ability for those schools to get back up and running. So we've had crews right out across the region from both QBuild as well as local principals have been working in partnership today, going to have a look at those schools that have been impacted in one way, shape or another. Before I get into the details, I just want to make the point to everybody, and this is a really important one, whether you're someone who relies on a parent who having that option of going a child to school means they can get to work or a service industry, or indeed you are one of those parents. By 5 p.m. today, every school in the impacted area will have a status of open or closed, every single school. There is a dedicated website, which is, if you Google School Closures Queensland, but we will also put that on that disaster website we've been outlining. But if you Google School Closures Queensland, by 5 p.m. today, every individual school will be listed there. Where it's safe to do so, schools will reopen, with the exception of the Gold Coast, where there remains some significant damage, power loss, and issues with transport, which I'll get onto in a moment. I want to give an example of why it's the case that there isn't a blanket across a region. So at Narangba Valley, the state school will be open tomorrow, but the Narangba Valley State High School won't, where there's been significant trees that have fallen down and won't give access. So wherever possible, wherever it's safe to do so, schools will be open. I make the observation, parents and school communities know their school, and we're asking people to make sure that they stay safe. And if getting to school from your particular property isn't safe, well, of course that's a decision that parents will make, and they'll be supported in that, I can assure you. But where it's safe to do so, those schools will open, and that will enable parents to be able to plan tomorrow, and we thank them very much. While I'm on schools, I'm mindful that on Wednesday something quite significant, and that is NAPLAN, is slated, so we wanted to give some confidence for people to plan on that. So if your school hasn't been impacted by this, so if you're outside of this region, NAPLAN will absolutely go ahead on Wednesday, March 12. If there is an impact, there is the ability for it to be, there's a 2-week window. The date that we have slated is March 17, so that's Monday, March 17. And that will be communicated directly by the principals with the regional directors as to whether or not a school's been impacted and that can't go ahead. So that will be outlined this week, but it's important that that important testing goes ahead. So it will proceed on Wednesday if you're not impacted. If you have been impacted, there is that window so kids can still have their NAPLAN testing, and I understand that's very important for parents. Turning to public transport. This morning we saw some services operate on that Sunday timetable across the board. We're very grateful for the way that those staff went and did that to be able to allow some key workers to get to work. Brisbane Council has advised this morning that bus services in Brisbane were suspended, and again what we have done is we've put that on the journey planner, and as we will continue throughout this event. Turning to tomorrow, bus services will again operate, but on a limited capacity, and we're urging people to have a look at that TransLink journey planner that you always do. But bus services are operating right throughout the region: Brisbane, Moreton Bay, Sunshine Coast, Ipswich, Toowoomba, Lockyer Valley, Logan, Redland, and we'll update the community on Harvey Bay, of course, as well. There'll be no bus services on the Gold Coast tomorrow. The school bus services, those providers, have indicated that where schools are open, they will be working as well, and that'll be communicated directly through the school. To rail, another important transport mode, rail will operate, but at this stage it's slated to be operating on a Sunday timetable, and again it's important that you have a look at your journey. But so from the city to Northgate, and many of those other key locations, there will be there will be services on a Sunday timetable, and alternative bus services will be provided on the Caboolture Sunshine coastlines. Check the journey planner for details. Turning to trams, Gold Coast Light Rail will not run tomorrow. Energex is working to re-energise that system, and it takes 24 hours after the system has been energised. The moment we get an indication of that, we'll put that service back on as well. The red alert we spoke about has been lifted by Maritime Safety Queensland. That's been lifted from midday today, but it's been lifted so that it can aid recovery operations. We're asking people to be safe on the water, of course. Flash flooding has impacted many of our roads, and to give you an indication of the challenges, we have traffic signals that remain out across many of the regions. We've had 240 road tech crew out today. They are working to restore that network. We are deeply grateful for that, and they will continue to work to do that where it's safe to do so, and with Energex bringing power back on, that certainly helps as well. I just want to turn to some of the hardship payments, and I flagged that we are working very closely with the federal government on that personal hardship assistance for those first areas, and we'll be outlining to eligible residents about those costs and what that covers, but I do want to communicate to people that we understand there's been hardship as part of this, and we'll be working with the Commonwealth Government to make sure that that flows quickly. We're activating a number of Queensland community recovery hubs as we said we would, and the planning was already underway for that, to make sure that that seamless transition from response to recovery occurs. The first of those will be open very shortly, and we'll be communicating that with Queenslanders. We already have 800 staff prepared and ready to go, and that's manning a 24/7 hotline. And if you do need that assistance, 1800 173 349. The hotline for assistance, 1800 173 349. That's everything from mental health support, financial assistance. If you're having problems with insurance, those hotlines are there to help, and we are determined to navigate you through this disaster. Turning to health, we're working around the clock to ensure business as usual across the health network for tomorrow. And I make the observation that each of those health networks will be liaising directly with patients, but we've done a lot of work to make sure that services can resume. And that includes having mains power at the Gold Coast University Hospital. I make the point that the Tugun and Redlands satellite health centres remain closed, but we're doing all we can to bring things back online. To dams, releases from North Pine Dam commenced at 3 a.m. today, and that was because of rain in the North Pine catchment. There are no gated releases from Wivenhoe or Somerset Dam, and I'm told that SEQ Water will be updating the media very shortly at 3 o'clock today. As we begin the clean-up, councils are also beginning to do their bit as well, and we thank local government for doing those things that make our communities what they are. And I'm mindful that even some bins got collected today on a Sunday morning, and that's a great result. Supermarkets, many have reopened and will continue to do so on a case-by-case basis. It's imperative that we do all we can to support that, and where it is safe to do so, supermarkets will reopen, and staff will continue to serve people. And the work of those supermarkets, and particularly the workers who go there, has not gone unnoticed by the community. Finally, I want to finish with a message to Queenslanders. It's firstly one of great gratitude. Great gratitude for the way that neighbours have helped neighbours. Strangers have helped strangers. And throughout this, I've spoken about those 4 challenges and things like the wind and the waves and the rain and then the flooding. And we've seen different parts of a broad area and a populated area experience different ones of these at different times. But one thing's remained consistent, and that is the community spirit and the resolve. And I want the community to know that there won't be daylight between the response and the recovery, because that's what makes communities. And we've seen throughout this event the goodwill of this community. And I have every confidence, because of that it'll be a strong recovery. And I want to assure Queenslanders that our resolve from one end of the state to the other, who in the last month have been hit with a series of challenges. Our resolve to see that job through and to make sure that this great state gets back on its feet will be unwavering, and we'll be here for the long haul. I'll hand over to Sue.
Thank you, Premier, and good afternoon, everyone. I'd just like to start today by expressing the challenges that TC Alfred has brought all of Southeast Queenslanders over the last week, and my thoughts are with all those that have been impacted by this event. As you're well aware, today we still continue to see those impacts. Thankfully, though, the impacts have reduced to the one hazard, and that's the rainfall. And as the Premier has informed you, we've seen up to 300 millimetres of rainfall in the Hervey Bay area through this morning, with up to 230 millimetres of that rainfall falling in 3 hours. So this system still has some significance and is expected to continue to produce heavy rainfall over our catchment area for today. Let me go back and just recount the steps of Tropical Cyclone Alfred as Alfred approached the coast, and talk through what it did yesterday, to talk through the impacts that we saw yesterday, to land at where we are now and what we can expect to see in the next 24 hours. So as we're well aware, Tropical Cyclone Alfred crossed our coastal islands, Moreton Island, as a Category 1 system on Friday evening, to move up to the Bribie Island area offshore late Friday evening and stay in place in that offshore position off Bribie Island for over 12 hours, all throughout most of Saturday, without moving. We continued to see impacts from Alfred through Saturday. In particular, the coastal hazards continued with the series of strong winds onto the coast, producing large waves and that significant beach erosion which remained ongoing through yesterday. The heavy rainfall commenced yesterday throughout southeast Queensland, but because we had a system positioned off the coast, we were fortunate that that heavy rainfall did not penetrate too far inland and saw most of those heavier falls about the coastal and adjacent inland districts. Probably what was of most significance yesterday was the continuation of the gusty winds. So as Alfred came through on the Friday night, many residents of southeast Queensland experienced the winds that were produced from Cyclone Alfred, and particularly concentrated on the southern side of that system. Those winds were just as significant yesterday, and coming from the easterly direction, and which probably for most residents maybe was unexpected, given that Cyclone Alfred had weakened to a below cyclone category system, was a tropical low. This is quite usual for these types of events, in that we still continue to have a tropical low in the area, and they then interact with the surrounding synoptic system. So what we did actually see through Saturday is a high pressure system over the Tasman Sea, moved out into the Tasman Sea, and also strengthened, which tightened that pressure gradient up between the low pressure system that remained in place and the high pressure system that moved up into that area. And therefore we had those that extended period of gusty winds through Saturday night and even into Sunday morning. So what were some of the observations that we observed in the last 24 hours? Let me start with the winds, where we saw 109 km/h wind gusts out at Cape Moreton, 104 km/h wind gusts at Redcliffe, and 94 km/h wind gusts at the Gold Coast Seaway. But it wasn't just about our coast, and up on the range at Toowoomba in the last 24-hour period we've had wind gusts to 98 km/h. Fortunately, during this morning we're starting to see those winds ease. In regards to rainfall in the last 24 hours, and as I said, the first hugely significant day of rainfall associated with the system, and we have been waiting for it for several days. 24-hour totals up to 9 a.m. this morning, the highest total we saw was 322 millimetres at Mount Glorious, just to the west of the Brisbane suburbs. Once again, at Upper Springbrook, where we typically get high rainfall rates, we had 270 millimetres of rainfall in 24 hours to 9 a.m. this morning. But as the Premier shared with you, significant rainfall this morning, and I've already touched on the Hervey Bay rainfall that we saw through that 3-hour period to 9 a.m. this morning. But also since 9 a.m. we've seen falls of up to 100 millimetres in 3 hours over the Brisbane suburbs. And we're starting to see some of those Brisbane creeks rise very rapidly, and flash flooding is of highest risk. So what can we expect in the next 24 hours? Good news on the coastal front. We still do have a coastal hazard warning out, but latest observations are showing that the coastal conditions are starting to ease. So this morning there was still the odd 4-metre wave coming through, but those heights are significantly reducing, and they will continue to reduce as the day goes on today. So I think we're through the worst in regards to our coastal hazards. The severe weather warning does remain current, and at the moment it is a severe weather warning for heavy to locally intense rainfall and damaging winds. But we just talked through the winds, and the observations are showing the winds are gradually easing. So there may be gusts come through at times through the early afternoon period, but those gusts will continue to ease as we head into the night period. However, the heavy rainfall will continue, and flash flooding is a high risk. We expect, or it is possible, that we have 6-hourly totals of 80 to 130 millimetres during today, with 24-hour totals of around 120 to 200 millimetres. But within that, we could see locally intense falls, as we saw up at Hervey Bay this morning, and we could have falls higher than 200 millimetres, and up to 250 millimetres is possible. A flood watch remains current, and the flood watch continues to extend from the Mary River in the north to the Queensland border, including the South Coast Creeks, the Logan Albert River, and westward to include the Condamine River and the McIntyre River. There are also a series of flood warnings out, with major flooding for the Bremer River, Worrell Creek and the Logan River, and a series of minor to moderate flood warnings also across that flood watch area. And we'll continue to monitor that rainfall throughout the day, and the flood warnings will be updated as we observe heavy rainfall and runoff into those river systems. So in summary, this event is still not over. We are starting to see an easing of the coastal conditions and an easing in the damaging wind gusts that were observed in the last 24 hours. However, the rainfall will continue, and the risk of intense rainfall with localised flash flooding is real. So residents of southeast Queensland, they're urged to remain up to date with the latest weather warnings and heeding the advice of their local authorities from the emergency services. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'd like to start by saying I'm really pleased to say we still have not had any loss of life or missing persons as a result of the weather event. And I start by saying that every day because I think in events like this, from our perspective, emergency services perspective, people are the most important thing that we need to look after. We're now seeing severe flash flooding as a result of the heavy rain sitting right over top of the Fraser Coast and southeast Queensland. A severe weather warning was issued, as the Bureau said, at 4:54 this morning for damaging winds and heavy rainfall that may lead to flash flooding from Hervey Bay down to the New South Wales border. At 9:35 this morning, we issued a public safety a declaration under the Public Safety Preservation Act for the Hervey Bay Police District. And we did that to provide the police in that area additional emergency powers to be able to carry out evacuations and support the community to the flash flooding that we saw was occurring there. Members of the public and motorists within the declaration were urged to stay indoors and do not drive unless necessary whilst that event was occurring. At 10:30 a.m. this morning, we issued an emergency alert for the Fraser Coast coastal areas between Woodgate and Inskip Point, again due to that heavy intense rainfall that we're experiencing, and we're asking people to take shelter now. Now both of those declarations and alerts were issued to enable our emergency services to be able to respond to the community. So far this morning in Hervey Bay, we've seen flash flooding across the suburbs of Torquay, Scarness, Pyalba and the surrounds. We've deployed police and swiftwater rescue crews to rescue people from their houses and their cars. A number of houses and businesses we are aware have been inundated, and we've had 7 rescues from vehicles, and we've had 9 dwellings that have had to be evacuated. Police assisted staff at the Yerengan Retirement Village to move residents from the lower floors to the upper floors to ensure that they were kept safe. We've also evacuated the Hervey Bay watch house, where we had 5 people in the watch house, and relocated those people to Maryborough to ensure that they were kept safe. And a temporary police station was established in Hervey Bay at the St James School, and this facility was established to ensure that the police could continue operations should the police station be impacted. Right across that Fraser Coast, we've seen the police attend to 35 jobs, including 14 for people that were in danger, in risk of losing their life. SES responded to 155 jobs, call-outs in that area, with 111 of them being flood-related. The Queensland Police in the Hervey Bay area this morning recalled all available staff back to work, including our water police, which supplemented our staff there by an additional 25 staff, with staff coming from nearby areas. The SES in that area had 2 flood boats and 9 vehicles, 55 personnel staged at Maryborough to respond, and the flood boat teams are in Hervey Bay, and additional units were deployed from Gympie. I want to say, as the State Disaster Coordinator, we took a very purposeful approach across our at-risk areas to make sure that our resources were staged in those areas. And as you saw today, the resources were there and available, and we were able to surge from nearby areas. And finally, in relation to Hervey Bay, I'd like to say that a place of refuge has been established at the Hervey Bay Baptist Church, should anyone need that assistance. I just really want to acknowledge our crews right across emergency services. I think they have done a stellar job on the ground today to respond to these incidents, and they continue to do so. Other areas we're seeing flash flooding that's happening right across Gold Coast, Moreton, Brisbane and surrounds. The calls are also for assistance in the Brisbane, with motorists stuck in the floodwaters. There's more than 100 roads closed in Brisbane alone as a result of flash flooding in suburbs such as Carindale, Oxley and Stones Corner. There's been calls for assistance by both police and fire and rescue. We're seeing localised flooding in our public parks and sporting grounds, so I really urge people to stay out of these localised flooding. We're seeing young people wanting to go and play in these waters. Those drains in those areas are very dangerous, so please stay out of this flash flooding. Some parked cars we're seeing have been inundated. Door knocks are happening right around the Wilston and Kedron Brook area, just for people for awareness. And our Rockley markets, I'm pleased to say, have not been impacted, but we're monitoring and we're engaging with the operators, and we have been engaging with those operators as part of our planning all the way through this event. On the Gold Coast, we've seen 26 roads closed to flash flooding, but it's dynamic, that number will change. Again, we're seeing water in the public parks and surrounds, and in some areas we're seeing water encroaching into backyards including down around the Currumbin Valley area. Across all this area since 6 o'clock this morning, we've seen the police respond to over 203 calls for assistance, the SES for over 1,017 calls for assistance, and there's been a number of swiftwater rescues, which I'll let the Fire Commissioner speak to shortly. With respect to resources, we've had an extra 249 QPS resources on the ground today. We have additional officers arriving in Brisbane today from the north, and can I just say, our North Queensland Police were more than willing to put their hand up and come down and help the southeast corner, just like our southeast corner police only a month or so ago went up and helped them, and I think that's fantastic. And we also have another 65 SES arriving in Brisbane today from across the state, and another 100 SES arriving in Brisbane tomorrow from interstate. So can I just say, back to flooding, we continue to work with our local councils, because that last threat was our riverine flooding, and we continue to work with local councils and map that risk, and we will continue to message the community as required. As I said yesterday, we've now done over 1,000 door knocks just to the community to make them aware of their risk of riverine flooding, and I ask that you stay in contact with your local disaster dashboards so you understand your risk. And finally, there's a lot more rain forecast today, as we've heard from the Bureau. We've not had any loss of life from this weather event, and I'd be really keen to keep it that way because Queenslanders matter. Please know your risk, understand the conditions, and don't undertake that risky behaviour. Do everything in your power to keep yourself and your family safe. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Our crews have been incredibly busy throughout the night and through the course of today, with well over 400 calls playing out over that period of time. Through that period of time, since 6:30 this morning, 171 have been rescue related, and 11 people rescued as a result, and 25 people evacuated. Hervey Bay was the centre of 75 calls this morning, through the course of this morning, with most of those incidents now closed out. And they included a range of incidents from people trapped in vehicles, people with water around or within their properties. Just through the course of this video teleconference, we've had a rescue completed just outside of Hervey Bay at the Bunya Creek area, with one person rescued from a vehicle in that location, so a great outcome in that specific matter. We do have swiftwater specialists, firefighters positioned and pre-deployed right across the region, and they stand ready to respond. And they're backed up by over 300 crews on the ground, with about 1,000 personnel from across Rural Fire Service Queensland and Queensland Fire Rescue, working to support community response and support early recovery operations. They do stand ready, and they'll continue to stand ready to support community needs as we move through this event. But can I just say a sincere thank you to all of the Queensland Fire Department staff and volunteers and other emergency service workers for the extraordinary efforts they are putting into this event and the selflessness that they are putting themselves at. Can I also say, from a community point of view, my gratitude for the community for heeding advice and the warnings. Please continue to do so. It is still a very live risk of flash flooding and a potential threat to life. So please follow that advice and stay safe and make good decisions. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Energex and Ergon staff during this event have now reconnected 120,000 properties and mums and dads, including 40,000 today as at 1 p.m. That 40,000 includes Toowoomba, Hervey Bay and South East Queensland. We'll continue to connect during today and into tonight, as we did last night. There's currently 320,000 premises or businesses that need reconnecting. We'll continue to work hard over the coming days to do so. I sincerely thank you all for the patience you've shown, and I'm sure the patience you'll show as Queenslanders as we continue to roll it out over the next few days. There's been 1,500 live lines on the ground. Please stay away from them and report them if you see them. Just assume that they're always live. So my final message is sincere thanks from the crews that are out and about. There's over 2,000 now across South East Queensland, Ergon and Energex in this patch. Ergon in Toowoomba and Ergon in Harvey Bay. They'll continue to work hard to reconnect the network for you. Stay safe.
Good on you, Peter. Thank you very much. Over to you guys.
So there are members of the community, particularly in Brisbane, who were taken aback by the strength of the wind overnight. Were the warnings from authorities accurate?
Well, I'll certainly point to the BOM, to the Bureau, about the warnings they put out. But I'll make this point. Because of the work that Queenslanders did in the lead up to this, that has seen the state so far come through without losing a life. And that's our hope. That is always the number one thing when you go into a disaster. And my message to Queenslanders is we're approaching the end of that window in terms of flooding, as the Bureau has said. But just in those remaining hours, just do the little things. You know, there's no need to go into flooded waters. But people did those preparations. They cleared their yards. They had the plans in place. And I think on the back of that, overwhelmingly, Queenslanders have responded well.
Were you and authorities caught off guard by the strength of the wind last night in Brisbane?
Well, I might ask the Bureau
I'm asking
to.
you as someone who's getting briefings from the BOM, were you caught off guard by what you saw last night?
I've been through a lot of cyclones in my time, and one thing's for certain is they present a risk, which is why you've got to respond and you've got to always be ready. And you've got to be ready for all of those things, for winds and waves, for rain, for flooding, and a system like a cyclone will continue to provide a challenge even once it crosses land. I make the point that last night in Toowoomba there was wind gusts recorded of nearly 100 kilometres an hour. That they are challenges that will always be presented, but that's why you've got to do the preparation. And I can't fault Queenslanders for the way they're prepared. I think if you look objectively, you've got such a large populated area of people who've never been through a cyclone before, and the way the community responded, I think was first class.
Do you think the warnings yesterday for what happened last night were sufficient?
Well, the warnings have been out for a week, and people have prepared. And you'll never stop Mother Nature, but you have to prepare for it. And people did that. They overwhelmingly did that. I can't fault the performance of Queenslanders. Now, the Bureau can talk about when warnings were put out, but as someone who has seen the way the community has rallied, I think Queenslanders have done a pretty good job.
We saw, particularly in the Brisbane City area, the decision to resume public transport. And you did touch on bin collection.
Yeah.
In your view, was that premature?
Provided we continue to do things in a safe way, we have to do all we can to make sure that people can get back and do the things that they need to do. I point to schools tomorrow. So the Catholic system, the independent system, as well as our state schools, have all been working together today to do those assessments. Now, you could take the approach of a blanket closure, but instead what they've done is worked and said, where is it safe to be able to bring safely teachers and kids back to school? And that gives you the best opportunity to allow kids to get an education and be prepared, and it can be done in a safe way. And overwhelmingly, I take the view that provided people use common sense approach and you don't go driving into floodwaters, you don't put yourself in harm's way, I have faith that people do the right thing. And I think this event's proven that.
With the schools, just to be clear, so people find out every day at 5 p.m.
Yeah.
if their school's open?
Exactly, Jack. We'll update Queenslanders every day, and as I said, there's today at 5 p.m. is the hard deadline, and on that every school will be listed, and that will give parents an opportunity to be able to plan. And I'm mindful that as we go further into the process, schools, particularly from tomorrow, we'll get a greater window of bringing schools back on Tuesday. So as early as we can communicate it, we will.
And from what you're hearing, could some be closed for a few days because of the damage that they experienced?
Some schools have suffered significant damage. There's no doubt about it. And where there's no power, for example, there is no way that teachers and kids should be going back into that classroom. We've got to make sure that that they're safe. But where there is the option to bring people back, we should. And we should for a couple of reasons. One is education matters, and it's important we give kids every chance. The other thing is those parents of those kids are important Queenslanders. Some of them will be the nurse at the hospital that means the difference between someone having their emergency surgery or not. Some of them will be that supermarket worker who's stacking the shelf to enable someone to feed their family after not being able to go to the shops for a few days. So it's important wherever possible we give every chance to return things to normal. It's got to be safe, it's got to have common sense, but wherever possible you do all you can to get life back to normal.
And on that, can we just quickly confirm public servants again and court reopening?
Yep, that's right. And the public service is in the same boat. They'll be going to work tomorrow where it's safe for them to do so.
And when will supermarket shelves be restocked?
Well, the Deputy Premier has done a lot of work with supermarkets to make sure that some of those restrictions have been removed, including the ability to resupply. That window is still open, so that resupply can begin. At the moment, transportation is available to go in earnest. It's also important that wherever possible, people are able to go to the shops. And throughout this, the way that all supermarkets have been able to try to keep open has enabled people to try to have those windows to be able to get the necessities. And by doing that, people have been able to prepare. And there has been an overwhelming sense of goodwill. And I'm grateful for that.
Sue, let's ask Sue some questions
Sue.
about the weather. Just with what we saw in Brisbane last night with those winds, was the Weather Bureau caught off guard by how strong those winds were? and strong across the south?
No, absolutely not. And as I said, this can be a feature of these sorts of systems when they, even though the systems do weaken below tropical cyclone intensity, they then interact with the surrounding environment in which they sit. So as I explained earlier, we had a strong high pressure system to the south of this system, and we maintained a very strong gradient. The severe weather warnings continued through yesterday, and we were warning for damaging winds and intense rainfall. With tropical cyclone systems, the service switches from a tropical cyclone watch, which we continue with a tropical cyclone watch while we have a tropical cyclone system. And you will recall from late last week, the tropical cyclone watch was then overlapped with a severe weather warning, in that the severe weather warning gave us the opportunity to describe what those impacts look like. So a tropical cyclone watch and warning, noting we've moved into a warning, describe the impacts such that we were expecting damaging winds and we were expecting heavy to intense rainfall. But the severe weather warning product gives us the opportunity to detail what do those damaging winds look like and what strength are we expecting. And in regards to rainfall, what are those rainfall totals looking like? So we overlapped our products into Friday. The tropical cyclone warning then continued while we had a tropical cyclone system, and then that shifted to a tropical cyclone track, which we maintained a tropical cyclone track until the system moved over land. So that was one important piece of the puzzle that I didn't describe earlier. Where is the remnants of Alfred now, and where will the remnants of Alfred be in the next couple of days? So Alfred moved overland in the overnight period last night to be positioned near Kingaroy early this morning. It's continued to move on a westerly track during today, and it's probably around about the Miles area now, so in the southern interior of Queensland. We're expecting that to move southward during today, and that's why the rainfall will extend across the severe weather warning area that we have described right down to the Queensland border and the adjacent inland. Then we'll see the remnants of Alfred cross the Queensland-New South Wales border, where unfortunately will give northern New South Wales another day of rainfall, heavy rainfall through that area. But finally, for Eastern Australia, we should see an easing of the conditions on Tuesday.
So just to confirm, Harvey Bay is part of the Alfred system, or is it part of its own system?
Yeah, Harvey Bay is part of the complex system in which Alfred sits. So it's producing an environment that's conducive to this unsettled weather and the intense rainfall.
So when will the heavy rain end? Is that going to end soon, or by Tuesday? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So for Queensland, today is the key day for heavy rainfall, and where we'll see the most significant 24-hour totals, and an easing of that rainfall through Monday. But don't expect that the skies will be clear on Monday. It will be unsettled, and we are expecting showers and potentially thunderstorms through our area. But then the system will shift south of the Queensland border, where the conditions will be greater, heavier rainfall will occur over New South Wales during Monday, and then an easing of the conditions for Eastern Australia on Tuesday.
And when do you expect those severe weather warnings current at the moment to cease?
At this point in time, we'll continue to monitor the situation, but we expect them to continue through Sunday, and if not into the overnight period Sunday, before seeing a sufficient easing such that we're dropping below warning criteria into Monday.
And when it comes to flooding, is it creek flooding that we should be most worried about, or is river flooding also a major concern?
Both are a concern. Creek flooding in particular is flash flooding, so it occurs over a short period of time, and that's what we're seeing through the Brisbane creeks today, where we're seeing that intense rainfall, and as I reported earlier, up to 120 millimetres in 3 hours. So these are creek systems that rise very rapidly as the rainfall switches on. As soon as we switch that rainfall off, we should see those creek levels ease fairly rapidly, but it's then the river systems that we need to keep our eye on, because the runoff into the river systems is over a longer period of time, and we use the key marker of 6 hours. So flash flooding is any sort of flooding that occurs from rainfall on the ground to flooding within a 6-hour period. Our riverine flooding is typically beyond 6 hours. So from the onset of the rainfall, flooding would not be expected in our riverine systems, not our creek systems, because they are in flash flood at the moment, and they'll stay in flood throughout the day as that intense rainfall continues.
Is a major river flood though likely over the next couple
We
of
do
days?
have major flood warnings out. There's a major flood warning for the Bremer and Worrell Creek, and a major flood warning for the Logan River.
And for the Brisbane River, was going to be similar to 2022?
Oh no, this situation is somewhat different to 2022 for this event, and it's a tropical cyclone as well. So there's been impacts with this event that we didn't see in 2022. There's been impacts with this event that we did see in 2022, but in 2022 we had 4 days of persistent heavy rainfall across the Brisbane River catchment, and we don't have that prolonged rainfall for this event.
Just last one, why did the state not issue a 6 shelter warning, including river emergency SMS broadcast system?
Well, I'll get the acting commissioner to address that, but I'll make this observation. Where we've had information, we've given that information to Queenslanders in real time, and Queenslanders are going to continue to see that. I have this overwhelming view that the best thing you can do is share information, and the Commissioner has the same approach. And with that, Queenslanders make good decisions, and we've seen lots of it, and I'm deeply grateful for the way they've done that.
The Lord Mayor did say that we dodged a bullet yesterday. Was that language confusing or disappointing?
No, the way that the Lord Mayor and I have worked together has been outstanding. He's someone I trust, and he's someone who always picks up the phone, and I've really enjoyed working with him. And in terms of how we've shared advice, I have not only updated Queenslanders regularly, I've had those mayors, including the Lord Mayor, in the disaster committee meetings. And on the back of it, we've had a much better system, a system where we've all worked together, because in the end, we serve the same people. One call them ratepayers, one call them taxpayers, but it's all the same people. And likewise with the Prime Minister. I've been in regular contact, and we've had the Minister here, and on the back of it we have been able to have a stronger response.
Thank you, Premier. Can I just address our warnings and how we've approached our warnings, please? The Premier regularly spoke about those 4 stages of the event, and what we did do is we issued emergency alerts as they were required for those stages. So as we saw the threat of storm tide surge, we issued emergency alerts to those areas, those defined communities that needed those alerts with the threat of storm surge. Then, as the cyclone approached the coast, we issued further emergency alerts for those island communities, and as we looked at the track of the cyclone up around Moreton, Redcliffe, Bribie, up that end of the state. Once those emergency alerts were no longer in place, as the Bureau indicated, we withdrew those emergency alerts so we didn't have confusion in the community, and they were replaced yesterday afternoon at around 5 o'clock, just before 5 o'clock, with a severe weather warning, which covered all the way from Maryborough, all the way to the border, right out past Toowoomba to around about Dalby. And that severe weather warning spoke openly about intense heavy rainfall, potential for flash flooding and severe winds. And that was done for a reason, because the system had a far wider impact area than where it was just crossing the coast. That remained in place. This morning at 4:54, the Bureau issued another severe weather warning, which extended that area right up into Hervey Bay, because that was what the forecast was showing. Then later in the morning, I think it was around about 7 o'clock, or 7:30, there was a further increased severe weather warning issued, and that was issued with a SUS warning, so an emergency warning signal to those areas that we were expecting impacts, and we asked for that increased severe weather warning to be broadcast with a SUS warning, with an emergency warning signal, so the community in that area knew. And then we saw the impacts around Hervey Bay, so then we issued the emergency alert for that area, asking people to take shelter. So the alert system works in tandem with the Bureau's weather warning system, as well as our local council system. So, as the event steps through, we'll continue to do that. And then when that emergency alert is no longer required in the Hervey Bay area, we will withdraw that alert, just like we will withdraw the Public Safety Preservation Act declaration. But the severe weather warning, which warns our community in those broad areas, and look, the reason we put that in is, as we saw in Toowoomba, people experience winds and heavy rain as far in as Toowoomba and Lost Bower and Toowoomba, and they were in that warning area.
Why were there no 6 shelters issued yesterday? Were they needed?
Well, on our severe weather warning that was issued yesterday, the information that emergency services provide on the BOM Bureau warning is really clear. It actually says, make sure where your children are, that you should stay off the roads where possible. And the last one says you should go indoors to a secure room. So if we were to issue a seek shelter warning across an area from Hervey Bay to Toowoomba to the Gold Coast, we wouldn't be given the community the right advice at that point in time. It was in the strong weather warning system that says if you experience these heavy winds, if you experience this severe, intense rainfall, this is what you should do. Then we target our emergency alerts to the communities that are directly impacted by that weather system, so that we support that and we give the community advice. Thank you.